tall you guys are. Hello, very small crowd. My name is Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him. And this is the June edition of Poetry at the Point, brought to you by the St. Louis Poetry Center. I'm really excited you're here in person or on the live stream. Welcome to you on the internet. I'm excited to bring you the poetry of Daniel Biegelson, Tim Rowden, and Carroll. This evening, a couple of our usual quick announcements. Not a big crowd, so no harm in this, but try to stay safe. We got extra masks and some sanitizer over there if you should choose so. Big shout out to the members of the St. Louis Poetry Center. You can become a member if you would like. Definitely see me or Aaron afterwards on the website. It is very easy to click on from the very front of our website, so please do that. Thanks to the Missouri Arts Council, the Regional Arts Commission, and other folks who generously support our work and make this series possible. Each year, a lot of us are volunteers, myself included, so the funding we get, we do value extremely highly. Thanks to the Focal Point, they've been a really, really excellent host to us. And as I always say, I forget what hotel chain that was, but I'll keep the lights on. They've kept the lights on for us throughout the whole pandemic, and we really love coming here every month. Let's see, a couple of, actually only one, unfortunately, housekeeping announcement, which is the restrooms are out here to the left, because the other housekeeping announcement was that you can go next door to get drinks at Casa Maya, but you can't because it is closed forever, which is very, very sad. So hopefully a fantastic new local restaurant will take its place soon, and we can support them as well. So, not going to end that on a sad note. The happy note is that we have books for sale from a couple of our readers this evening. And you can check that out in the corner over there and pay them your hard-earned money for their worked on poetry. If you're watching this on Facebook, welcome to you on Al Gore's Internet. Make sure and comment, please share the link. Or if you're watching this in the future after June 27th, is that today? Thank you for continuing to engage with us. If we have time, after these lovely three poets have read their work, we will bring them up back to the stage and carry on a very informal question and answer session and make sure that you get your questions answered. So please think about those and post those in the comments and or tap me on the shoulder because there's like a few of us in the room. Let me know what you want us to talk about because that's always a fun way to humanely end the evening. Okay, I think that's it. On to the poetry. Carroll is a poet, artist, and climate-focused clean energy researcher. Quite a sentence. I'm very jealous of that sentence. Kat is from Omaha, Nebraska, originally, where she received a Bachelor's of Environmental Science at Creighton University, and recently moved from New York, where she completed a Master's in Environmental Policy at Bard College. She recently completed the second of 2 chapbooks. Please welcome Kat Carroll.
Thank you. I'm very excited to start us off tonight. I'm going to set a timer for my own peace of mind so that I know that I am within the time. So just a brief introduction to some of the things that I write about. I write about the world that I live in. I write a lot about spring. I write a lot about the rain. I write about sadness. Some of these poems are about heartbreak. Some of them are about depression. Some of them are just about living life and overcoming grief and working through things. So very excited to be here with all of you. Okay, so we'll start with this one, which is called The Boat. Some nights I am a raging ocean, a freezing torrential rain beating down onto dark waters. On those nights, I try to also be the small boat tied near the shore, rocking in the waves, but not sinking or rupturing from shock in the cold rain. Somehow, I make it through, and usually, when I wake up, the waters have calmed. So that poem was about rough nights. The next poem is called The Bouquet, and last year I was madly in love with my best friend, as you do on occasion. And it was a very bad decision. Let's just say the feeling was not mutual. So this is the bouquet. I am brimming with something unnameable, unknowable. Every time you are near, I feel like my skin is on fire. It's a new feeling, actually, not one I've felt before. I can't sleep next to you, so I'm on your living room floor. There are flowers brimming from my chest, a bouquet. How I wish you wanted them, wish you felt an ounce of the alive that I feel when you are near. Instead, I cut the roots. Midnight on your kitchen tiles, I ask them quietly to die and grow something new. They are stubborn, they have refused for years. I will have to start a garden elsewhere. I cannot bear the thought. The next one is called Saltwater and Pressure. Sometimes when something's over, I have to sit and think about it for weeks on end, till the machinery of my brain, which can spin sharp, scything circles around anything, groans and comes to a rusty, slow stop. Then I let my worries, the jumped up hulk of that metal, slide into the sea. It's the only place I know of that's big enough to hold all my past and keep it deep enough that the salt water and pressure can corrode it to a final rest. This one is called Will You Live? Will you live? I ask myself. Will you live each day as if it's worth something, and suck the marrow from the bones of the busy streets, and feel the openness of each morning, and taste the quiet calmness of the night sky at dusk? Will you live? I prayed today to something. Some days I feel as though my body is a tattoo of a grief I can no longer name. Will you live? I ask myself again. Please, please. Take a walk in the park, in the spring, in the fall. Feel the rain on your skin. Move back in with your friend, find new lovers, give yourself new stories to tell. Live, I say, heartbeat thundering in my head. Live, I demand, with tears in my eyes. Stop thinking and feel the air. Next one is called Groceries Again, Sunday. After hours of restless waiting, the storm breaks. I am getting groceries from the car, and the air is light around my skin, the water wet along my mouth. I laugh, and in my apartment, I dry my headphones and strip down to my bra. Outside, it turns to sheets of rain. I see a light in the sky that might mean tornadoes in the distance. I don't check. I am home and safe, and the thunder is cracking through the window. There is nothing more beautiful than today. This is where things start to turn a little bit more hopeful. I think spring came, as it does. And yeah, started to see the beauty in things again. This one's called All the Poems I Write. All the poems I write start the same these days. There are mulberries staining the sidewalk. I can smell the algae and moss and earth nearby. The sky is a pale pink slice. And all the poems I write are the same. I am learning how to be alone without dying. I am learning of the value of simple things. I made panzanella today. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. I cleaned. I did good work. I drink coffee. Half the poems I write end the same. How dear your memory is. Come back, come back. The next one is called Park Time. Goes as such. There is a robin with a worm in its mouth, purple thistle on the ground. The trees shadowed and lit alive by a setting sun, gold and green all around. I see others taking photos too, and one guy smiles at me genuinely, looking past me to see where my camera is pointed, trying to see what I see. I have been thinking on this walk of humanity in its few hundred shades of aloneness. Each of us existing in our own thought space, dozens of feet from each other. Can we ever know each other fully? But the sky is lit up by the sun, and there is a bridge reflected in the green tree water, and I start taking notes of who I feel seen by, even if for a moment. and guy above with his wide open smile and cute jacket makes the list. I forgive myself a little bit for letting you be the last person to see me. Thank God for strangers in the park. And this is the second to last. I think I'm doing good on time so far. I might be going too fast. So this next piece was actually inspired by a line, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this name correctly, but Araceli Gourmet. They have a poem that is "You Are Who I Love." And the title of this poem is inspired by that poem, and it is You Who Did and Did Not Survive. St. Louis's 1 month spring is here. The air is soft and the night's calm, and the headphones and car singing feeling freer. Work is fast-paced and coffee is frequent, and I spend almost all of my time well. The simple richness of life, sweet along the edges of the grass and the sky. Tonight, my guitar teacher taught me how to solo on the minor pentatonic scale, and I came home, sprinted around the block with the joy of movement in my body, took a bath to wash the sweat away. The sky yesterday was one color, a pale pink peach slice against thunder blue clouds, and I was tempted to start journaling, just to have these days closer when they pass. I am frantic to cherish the sweet and the bitter, and that whole of incomprehensible feeling, that connectedness that runs so deep inside of me, that welling joy at being alive that is sometimes so gone. It is spring, and I am proud of who I am today, scaffolded together from the ruins of who I used to be, the memories of the people that made me, most of whom I have lost. I felt dead already, and now I am alive again, rebirthed with the trees and the migrating baby birds, the monarchs, the earth. This is the last one that I have. I think. So this one is called Not Forgetting. Someday, the grass will grow over my bones. The clay will form around my body the way it did my ancestors, and the wind will still turn in its curving paths. The seismic movement of the world's heat differential is carrying along the birds of the forests. Someday, the hills will bury our dead in their sand and their loam, and the hurried rush of day-to-day work and life will be buried too. No more mortgages or healthcare premiums, no more trying to fix systems broken by design. The only thing remaining will be the people and things that can stand up to the sun. The shared smiles over a glass of wine with the people you love. The handmade pizza on the stove. The teasing hint in your friends' voices and your own, the comfort of holding your lover. The grass at the edges of fall forests and the looks into the interminable within, and the kindness shared with others. And when they too fade, when the stories and the clay tablets and the hard drives where you hold the photos of you and your friends are lost in the annals, still there will be these, because you loved them. The universe will hold on to them as it holds on to the memories that fill its dark spaces. If it stands up to the strength of the sunlight or speaks even under the weight of the ocean, then it will stay and stay and stay until the sun is lost and the ocean scattered back to the stars in cold and icy memory of what space it filled before.
Thank you very much. And correct me if I'm wrong, was this your first time reading publicly?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate being given the gift of your bravery this evening, so thanks. Appreciate it. Our second poet this evening is Tim Rowden, a poet, journalist, and suicide loss survivor. Following the loss of his son Ian in 2021, he found refuge and healing in poetry. His poems chart a journey through grief, loss, healing, and forgiveness, and are part of a chapbook in development. Tim is the editor of the St. Louis/Southern Illinois Labor Tribune, founder of the Grief Project at thegriefprojects.com, and a presenter for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Please welcome Tim Rowden.
On September 10th, 2021, I lost my son to suicide. He was 22. Suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States, with 47,646 deaths reported in 2021. That's about one death every 11 minutes. My poems this evening are about that night and the days that followed. This first poem is about finding out. It's called Blue Red, the Flashing Lights. Blue red, the flashing lights on the street. Blue red on the apartments. Blue red on the police, waiting to tell me what I know and don't want to hear. Blue red and the white flash of the evidence technician's camera, behind the curtains you never closed. Behind the curtains that were never closed except tonight, taking pictures of the blood-soaked mattress, the gun in your hand, the position of your body on the bed. Every flash is a picture trapped in my head. You're very neat about it, the uniformed couch feels the need to tell me. Took the sheets off the bed before you did it. All the blood was mostly in one place. Which is to say your blood soaked into the mattress and what the mattress couldn't hold pooled on the floor beneath your bed. Which is another picture trapped in my head. I'm not neat about it when they tell me. On my knees in the grass, I howl like a bear with my foot caught in a trap. Blue red on the coroner and her assistant as they carried you out the door. As they carried you out the door, my beautiful boy, my precious son, in a zippered body bag. Blue red as they put you in the back of the windowless white van. Blue red lights reflected from the ambulance and squad cars as they drove you away. Blue red, nothing to see here. Blue red, no one to save. Blue red into the darkness. Blue red into the night. This next poem is about feeling anger and looking for someone to blame. It's called Fragile. I'm standing in your apartment waiting for your girlfriend and her father to collect the things she left behind. She is fragile in a way I don't trust. Everything she touches makes her cry. I'm not sure if I believe her. I blame her for your death. I tell her it's not her fault. I tell her depression is a disease that runs through our family like cancer. Nearby, her lawyer father is telling me a story that sounds like an alibi. About how they found you that night. How he called 911 and made excuses to the police before rushing her away. I nod as though I'm listening. All the while I'm wondering if she remembers the last words she said to you. I imagine they sounded like the chambering of a bullet. This next poem is about saying goodbye. It's called Gates of Heaven. I want to take back the day you first thought about killing yourself and all the bad days after. I want the last woman you loved to have loved you enough to carry her own pain instead of giving it to you. I want her to have answered her phone when you called. I want her to have called you back in time. I want you to know your second grade teacher came to your funeral, along with everyone else who ever knew you. I want you to know your eulogy was a standing room only affair. I want you to know they saw you. I want you to know they heard you. I want you to know you made a difference. I want people who never met you to know that you existed, that you were here and you were loved, and the music you made sounded like the gates of heaven swinging wide. This next poem is about cleaning up what's left. It's called I Have Lived in These Rooms Since You Left Them. Mahogany antique wood, your favorite scented candle, record on the turntable, dinner dishes on the table, wine on the counter, someone's camisole beneath the couch cushion. The laundry in the hamper still smells of your cologne. Needle on the turntable set to a song I've never heard. Bullets taken from the box on the floor, next to the empty space where your bed had been. Your absence is a presence. These rooms ache with it. This next poem is about depression and recovery and trying to find your way. It's called group therapy. Lindsay tells us she found her roommate overdosed and seizing. Later she tells me she was the one who woke up in the hospital. Miriam lost her daughter. I lost my son. Maggie lost her best friend 2 weeks before leaving for college. Sarah took a bottle of pills and wound up here. If misery loves company, this is the place to find it. Our case manager asks if we're safe. Have you had any thoughts of harming yourself or others in the past 24 hours? Have you used drugs or alcohol in the past 24 hours? On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your depression? 5. I would rate it 5. I would say there aren't enough numbers. One of the therapists tries to talk to me about God, which I'm sure is some kind of violation of the Hippocratic Oath. I don't trust God or doctors or therapists who want to talk to me about faith. Whatever faith I had died that night outside Ian's apartment. It appears he took his life, the police say. It's okay to be mad at him, the therapist says. And I'm not sure if she's talking about him or talking about God. I tell her not to talk to me about God. I tell her the next person who tells me he's in God's hands better be ready to tell me what God's hands were doing that night. Sneaking smokes, comparing notes behind the hospital, we talk about medications. Which work, which make your face swell, which calm you down, which knock you out. In 8 weeks, they throw you out, held together with duct tape affirmations and 3 bottles of new pills. The next day, you're sitting at a table in the Hill neighborhood, waiting for a friend. Your hands are shaking, so you take a pill. Try the meditation they taught you. Then try the one you taught yourself. Look at the trees. Count the leaves. Try not to think you're not going to make it. This last poem is about forgiveness. It's called She. She has butterfly tattoos on her shoulders, a heart-shaped doodle on her hand, something he drew for her on a coffee cup. She is the one I blame, believing her words were the hand that held the gun. The one I've forgiven, who broken and grieving sends me pictures on the 10th of every month. The last to hear his voice. The reason I'm here in this sunny cafe, pretending to like tea.
Thank you very much, Tim. I've asked the question once or twice over the last year or two randomly to poets who never quite had an answer for it about how poetry can be valuable through trauma. So I'm eager to explore that more with you in our conversation. Our final poet for the evening is Daniel Biegelson, the author of the book of Being Neighbors by Ricochet Editions and the chapbook Only the Borrowed Light by verse. He serves as the director of the Visiting Writer Series at Northwest Missouri State University, where he also works as an editor for the Laurel Review. He holds an MFA from the University of Montana and an MA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He hails from New Jersey and lives near Kansas City with his wife and 2 kids, where he came all the way from today, so he wins the award for longest traveled. Find him at danielbiegelson.com and find him on this stage right now. Please, Daniel.
Thank you. Those were 2 very powerful readings, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this experience and to have heard you all read and to follow you. I'm going to read, I'm going to kind of be a little indulgent here. I've never read this poem before. It's kind of a longer poem. It's written in sections. But in 2015, there was a famous, really infamous picture that went around the internet of Alan Kurdi, who was a 3-year-old Syrian boy of Kurdish origin. And my son was exactly the same age as he was in this picture. And so this poem is kind of a long response to that, and in many ways, kind of exploration to some extent, at least theoretically, of what poetry possibly can do or should do in response to the political events of our world, as well as, I'm sorry. That's good. Is that fine? Okay.
Great.
Okay. I can take off my shoes. All right. This is called The Metaphorical Heart. My son stops putting together a puzzle of the solar system to pronounce. I'm really stumped today. Then asks, what does stumped mean? Confused, stymied. What does confused mean? For weeks, I couldn't read or watch TV. After the photograph, the unbreathing boy on the beach, face down in the shallow surf, arms to his side and knees tucked slightly under the way a 3-year-old who still toddles in stilted, balancing steps sleeps. Bright red t-shirt and sneakers, hair neatly combed by the water. And above and wrapped in gray gauze, the sky yawned. The sky is quite hungry. The sky eats the clouds for dinner. My daughter riffs in extended soliloquy as she leaps from a couch to the hassock, scrambling to reach me. My son says, my heart was made to wave as I head out the door to work. My daughter replies, my heart is made of apples, as I bend to kiss her head. Maybe the metaphorical heart is supposed to ease the wound of disagreement with the open flesh of the world. Maybe its design is to lift us to repair. Maybe we are born, singed and signed, or now maybe is a galvanized steel pail hauled to the pasture, with its bottom rusted out and the heart magma incinerating its way through the chest, eyes burning too, the horse thirsting behind the barbed wire, and this fails again. And I'm sick of the spirit of capital, whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives, and the avocados, babies, and the tomatoes, the logic of distraction, logic of the uncanny, the center of a centerless universe, that philosophical understanding of distance, desire, death, drowning. Can I begin again? Without order, without reference, without image or idol, can I carry you a while Is my uselessness useful? I know that I can't speak for you. And really all I ever wanted was to paint sunlight on the side of a barn. But I see what I see differently in the afterbirth of afterbirth. The breeze stirs his hair. Inanimate words vibrate, clap as the leaves, pinwheel, elm. Again, the trick, I think, is to have each foot planted in a disparate present, each standing in deep and distant laceration. Dear reader, inside and out, are we afraid? I know what I want to say, but not sure I have permission. As my son puts another piece of the sun together. Purple clematis wraps around the black mailbox. Leaf stems curl around the thin netting. Are you held by the tendril of sky just outside the frame? Heirloom marigolds brought from Mennonites at a farmer's market bloomed from shaken seed year after year. After all this, somehow we arrived at couplets. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends. The curve is but a straight line, frightened by its own daring. In my meta heart, I know I would marry you again. Though for all our place settings, there's an empty seat. Forgive me for what I want to say. When every close breath smells of milk and feels like a betrayal of every vibrating atom, you see me. The uprooted trees alter the earth forever and ever. And lastly, the land will hold us both, even as we cling to ourselves and break open into flower. Unethical. To transfigure the refugee boy into a migratory bird, and more so solitary. Does all translation promise a return? Is all translation a signatory to the original, which will one day find the bullseye of your heart, for better or worse? Now I'm struggling to reverse the sea of leaves raining. The bitter wind hunts and the desperate roots walk. Once, I tried to set aside rage. I kept finding myself driving down the highway, rushing toward storms of my own volition, where even the long grasses and swales of trees would go wild in projected protest, till the earth grows cold, and the clouds rearrange the sky, and in the distance the tail of a pickup rears out of a ditch, and red lights gleaming in the sudden late April freeze. I can hear the ping of ice in the windshield, feel the slight fishtail, and then the car ghosting into a spin. Once I tried to set aside rage. I kept tying and retying your small shoes. Once I held on to rage, for better or worse. Let it drive me to the other side, whether dark veil descends and divides us, holds us back from where the carrier pigeon returns and graft saves the orange and you keep dissolving and becoming another you. I see a red shirt. I see a bird. I was thinking of the words that complicate that sentence. Then I was thinking of images to corroborate my feelings. The storm-cracked branch, twined still to the braided elm again, hangs on to its dying leaves which mimic the wind and will hold their serrated shade of green for a few more months. Then I was thinking of other people that paid to love for me in so many ways when I was out of ways to love. And I changed one letter and arrived in a place just farther down the road. Though it seems this is about me, it's really about you. I said no more sparrows if they were as rain and cloud. apologize for confusing purple finches with house wrens. I collected old lumber parcel numbers and obituaries. Waiting for repair, I felt my basket of allotted sky empty. Then I thought I should stop burying the lead. Incomplete apologies gather in the streets to protest. I'm examining the repercussions of ownership again. Imagine the multiverse at your door. Imagine adding to the circumference of the puzzled sun. Say nothing, or you're still waiting to be hailed from the busy boulevard by a stranger who calls your name and fills your cup, which is also her cup, which is also his cup, which is also their cup, past the brim. Dear you again. You exceed yourself and me. You misremember white bee and clover. You make a necklace and you could wear. Gather mark strawberries where we know they grow. This is how we speak each to each, past each other, calling loudly. Dear me, even in the smallest disclosure there is specificity, and such specificity burns. Remind me again. It burns with alacrity, it burns in comparison with incredulity. Dear you, in some far-off sense, the way clouds are conjunctions, or the way words tend to cluster just as they form or pile up, amused at the end of pages, the sparrow is not a bird, but a category. Dear me, the paradox of how not to love and how to love language as fire resides in comparison. What do I do with all my nuclear reactions? How many kinds of light can we name? Dear you, you can burn a house to cinder or heat a home. Be thankful, be sorry, be sting. I admire the vexing begonias and the coconut fibers hanging at the eaves of the porch darkening the day, and the couplets stumbling home from their disked fields and great offices, puddled construction sites and warehouses, tropical themed restaurants and corrugated factories, jigsaw lots and halogen lit classrooms, alluding to other lines and dwindling light. Dear me, the temperature drops and grass turns blue. Sound and cluster, couple together, tighter. You are on the outer rim. Send it be, shiver, remember to cycle to the warm heart, in and out. I am equal parts you and you and you. AP, Hill. Now I'm thinking simultaneously of reportage in Wind Springs. The red wool shirt rides on a roan horse. I'm as surprised as you to meet him here. At this point in the century, you already always politics of death camps masquerading as love of khakis itself. Certainty is the enemy. Do you see? Do you prefer a faith full of questions? Standing here, standing there, somewhere, someone weaves a flag from the pages of a book and sets it on fire. Maybe I mean autonomy, finding common root. My cup runs over. The gravity of it all pulls at us. In the meta-universe, a skyscraper rises in a small town in the Midwest. A black hole grows in a cosmic boondocks. Let me learn my bitter heart. Even when I say all is quiet, I ask a question. Even when I try to speak clearly, directly, I veer into vectors. This is how I know you love me. Dear God, I refuse. Replace the porch light, the bronze facsimile of a kerosene lantern. Open the door into the guarded night. Will you be present, even if by proxy, every child enters the covenant. And speaking of which, I wore my Mets cap in a Royals country yesterday. Yesterday exhausted its relationship to today. Dear God, I've been given fits and false starts. I'm having trouble separating out the innocuous. My heart is small. I'm not ashamed or free. What did you say about distraction? This poem could go on forever and ever. How does disease enter the world I've loved, who always, like the abrupt toad that interrupts the night's quiet? Here now, we're closer. Time is a language of lulls and whispers suddenly of remarkable terror. Realize that suddenly is another way of saying, look, no good epiphany. All my bedtime stories go, and then, why are all ghosts blind? Like shifting stories. Maybe I mean personification. The book has eyes. Go to sleep. The stars you cannot see. We may linger as the remainder of a contradiction. We cannot stop the sentence from starting over. The constellations of connotations depend at times upon the consonant. Do you see your face in the face of your father, your mother? The sky threatens to burst open with the squalor of cicadas or a chorus of rain. We circle about the subject, you. Misremember a turkey buzzard feasting beside a late blooming dogwood, and then you remember the misremembrance. Then a sparrow hawk too. Try again. Try to ignore the hymn coming from the white-framed synagogue. You can hear it as you walk past with your shepherd. There is the boy on a beach. Another and another. Like every sparrow falling, like every grain of sand, in every iteration. And inside, my son adds another piece of the puzzle to the sun. Some things are not yours. Not today, not tomorrow. Put that back. We're called. It goes on. Every word we utter falls another word into the universe. Possible to distinguish one from the other in a stanza that echoes the sensual formation of which we may be made or entangled. A soft mouth may feed you, persuade you to ripen and open, gloss skin, red honeycrisp cut, white petals flecked with black. A whole is space around which the white bee hums. Once on either side, you said you saw two moons in a dark variant of the sky. You're dead. We're not dead. In all our lives, numbered evenings, suture into one. Thank you.
So it's 8:25. If the poets are amenable to it, we started a little bit late. I would love for them to come up for maybe just 10 minutes or so and have some informal conversation. So Tim, Daniel, Kat, if y'all wouldn't mind coming back up, that'd be awesome. And then we will wrap. If anybody's got any jokes, now's the time.
You need to practice more of that every time.
What jokes? I can tell my Britney Spears joke again, but I'm not going to.
I think we've heard it.
You've heard it? You sure? Okay. So, let's see. I'm going to begin by asking Kat, so when you were the first to arrive and discover that Kasama is closed, so we started chatting. I'm really interested about kind of partially because it's something I'm obsessed with these days, this intersection between poetry, art, and kind of concerns about existential climate change. I struggle trying to make sense of that in a creative writing kind of way, in a way that just doesn't feel like stepping into the abyss and writing terrible poems. So I'm curious how you kind of process that all together in a way that is kind of generative, if that makes sense as a question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and in all honesty, in my poetry, I tend to steer away from climate because I tried it and it hurt my feelings. So we didn't stay there for very long. But yeah, climate and clean energy and what feels like the end of the world is hard to write about because it feels in some ways intangible and in some ways really, really sad. So it's hard to wrap your mind around it. And I found that for me, it's more important to focus, I think, on the natural world around us that we have and to cherish that. And if something comes from that, some decision point for you or some emotion that you feel in relation to climate, I think that's a starting point. But yeah, in all honesty, I'm not an expert because I've written a few poems about climate and a few poems about a lot of other things. But yeah, that's where I would start, I think, is the nature that we have and the fact that it might, parts of it might be taken away from us if we're not careful. So.
And I think it's it's that emotional response that like I've tried to kind of center on as well, Tim, which kind of leads me to my question for you, which was, and in your bio, you talked about finding refuge and healing in poetry. It's a tricky thing, right? That connection between like traumatic experiences, trauma in general, and art. So I'm wondering what that process looked like for you. Was it, did you find refuge and healing in poetry simply through trying to kind of process your way through things and kind of accessing that emotional part of things? What exactly was it? Was it,
For me, it started as processing my emotions and finding the right words in the right format to express what I've been feeling. At some point, it seemed like a way to give shape to my grief. And I think that's something that poetry can do for a variety of emotions, but for grief, it's this amalgamous thing. It's all consuming, all absorbing. And I felt like if I could hammer that into a shape, I could process it.
Yeah, and so you guys are teeing me up nicely, and I appreciate this. Which brings me to your kind of central beginning and kind of ending and image that your longer poem kind of spiraled off of is this image of the Syrian boy on a beach. I'm jealous as hell that you were able to create something successful from that image. I myself, for months, was trying to respond to. There was also kind of early on in the Trump administration, there was a image of it was a father and I think a daughter who had kind of died in the middle of crossing a river over in maybe the Rio Grande, somewhere kind of on the southern border. Also one of those things that just all of a sudden were viral and just horrifying to sort of look at. And I wrote a really bad poem that I will probably never read aloud. But my question for you is, I think something that we talked about this at dinner a little bit, feel challenged with is connecting what feels like the non kind of academic poetry world to the academic poetry world, and you as our token academic here on stage, I'm going to pick on you a little bit and just kind of ask, how do we sort of continue to do away with those silos? I think in towns where poetry communities are more connected, those lines are more blurry and things are more integrated. So I'm kind of curious to you, what role maybe is the question? Does poetry that kind of comes from the academy kind of play in 2023 different than it did even like a half a generation ago?
Wow. That's a big question, you know. It's a difficult question in some ways because I think there is a kind of dialogue that is already happening between sort of what we would classify as academic writing or poetry and, you know, I don't know, poetry of the streets or poetry that people are writing in their daily lives. I think one of the things that happens when we sort of suggest that when we sort of hyper specialize is that we sort of sometimes we forget that poetry is something that has been a part of people's lives. It is a part of people's lives when people go to church, they go to temple, they go to the mosque, and they're reading psalms, they're reading poems. Music is poetry. So I think that those categories are problematic. But I also think one of the things I've been seeing a lot in teaching is that many of my students are coming to writing out of places of deep pain and trauma and trying to process their feelings and thoughts, and they're coming to poetry to do that already. So I think some of those boundaries are already breaking down, and they're breaking down for a variety of reasons, because I think people are challenging the kind of sort of white masculine sort of patriarchy that sort of has held court in academia for a long time. And so as we're seeing like more and more people sort of enter into programs and writing, making it part of their lives, we're seeing people sort of break down those boundaries in the academy, which I think is kind of sort of like is a loop. But I think, you know, generally speaking, we can't be afraid to make mistakes as writers. So, and that is part of the I think performance. I think getting up and sharing our work is as much as part of is as important as writing it. It's not for everybody, but I think it is, because I think it's the community that it creates. And so as long as we keep the idea of community at the center of what we're doing, then we stop sort of thinking along these sort of divide. I don't know if that helps very much.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a central theme of why I love doing this, right? Even when it's 4 people in the crowd, it matters, community matters. So I'm going to start to close this up. So please begin by helping me appreciate these folks. Really thankful. Our next reading is going to be on July 25th. We have a couple of readers lined up, but not a third. So I'm starting to beg, plead. If you are a poet, if you know poets, please send them my way. And we're always interested in having a broad range of emerging, established, broad range of styles of folks on the stage. So please do let me know. If you are viewing this after the 27th in the future, we're so glad that you're here. Please comment, please share, please continue to spread the word about this reading series and about these lovely poets. Always thanks to Aaron Quick for making all of the gears spin behind the scenes. Thank you to you for showing up in person, and thank you to you for traveling near and from far to read this evening. Take care of yourselves and have a good one.